Welcome to the 2020 Lineman Celebration Week and Weducation Wednesday. My name is Amy Fishbach, and I'm the field editor for T&D World magazine. I'm honored to present Max Fuentes, who will be our speaker for today's educational session. Max worked as a journeyman lineman and foreman and retired as a grid asset supervisor for SMUD. He also served as the president and vice president of 2 vocational training schools for line workers. He now serves as a utility consultant. Thank you so much for joining us, Max.
My pleasure.
I also want to give a thank you to our 3 sponsors for Weducation Wednesday: SensorLink, IFD Corp, and Lineman Barn. Thank you so much for your support today. Also, I want to let everyone know that you can win a gift card to Cabela's or Bass Pro Shop from our sponsor, IFD Corp, by liking or commenting on this video on the International Linemen's Rodeo Association Facebook page. Now we're going to start a Q&A with questions from the Utility Line Program students at Metropolitan Community College of Kansas City. Max, the first topic that we're going to be covering is life in the line trade. And the first question comes from Riley Turpin. And he asks, why did you decide to go into line work in the first place?
That's a great question. So I didn't want to. I had no idea what a lineman did. I was working as a fitness trainer at a resort, so to speak. And a friend of mine, he was a lineman for the Sacramento Municipal Utility District. And we were out one day and he goes, "Hey, are you going to take the test for pre-apprentice lineman?" I go, What is a lineman? What do they do? He goes, "Well, when you go in your house and you turn on the light switch, you ever wonder how that electricity gets there?" And I told him I really hadn't thought about it. Like most people, I had no idea. I just made an assumption. It always came on. So I knew at the time I was a young man and I needed to find some stability in my life as far as a job. And I knew that SMUD was a great company. Great benefits, well known throughout the industry, very reliable. And I said, sure. So I put in my application and I took a written exam for the pre-apprentice position. And my friend taught me how to climb poles. And you have to understand something. I was an athlete my whole life, and climbing poles was maybe the single hardest thing I've ever done physically. And so we started out low, hanging cross arms, climbing the poles, and he taught me how to tie knots. Then I showed up for my first skills test, and I showed up outside the training facility, and there was a line a mile back. We had 5,000 applicants for 10 positions. And so I was very fortunate that I had already had some training underneath my belt. But, why did I go in? Basically, my buddy got me interested, and that's how I got into the trade.
Fabulous, Max. And it's been a great career for you. Thank you so much. Next, we have a question from Wyatt Asol. What is one quality you are looking for in someone you hire?
Okay, so that's a really good question, but I'm going to answer with, you aren't looking for one quality. So what you're looking for is, it wouldn't be realistic for me to identify the one quality for hiring. There's a lot of books and a lot of resources out there that will tell you this is the quality you need to have, but I wouldn't be doing you a service by giving you one. So I'm going to give you a couple of 3. So line work is physically hard and it's mentally challenging. And I've had apprentices with great attitudes, but lack the physical strength and stamina to perform the work. Conversely, I've had strong, physically capable individuals who didn't possess the mechanical ability or the mental aptitude to succeed in the educational segment of the apprenticeship. But these are the things that I would look for on an initial interview, not knowing who you are if you just sat down in front of me. And so I have 3 variables. One is good attitude. You have to have a really good attitude. I'm looking for someone who's physically in shape and healthy. And then the third one is willingness to learn. So if you bring these 3, characteristics that's a starting point. And then the rest is just a process of elimination between written exams, physical skills testing, and then evaluations and assessments.
Wonderful. And then can you give some advice on what you would give to a first year apprentice on a crew, just starting out in the trade? What would be your advice for him or her to succeed?
So you're going to be overwhelmed. The amount of information that you are going to be able to absorb and process and utilize is going to be very limited at first. So don't let that overwhelm you. One of the things I would say is be on time. If your start time is 7 a.m. and you get to the truck at 7 a.m., you're late. So get to your assigned location at least 30 minutes prior to shift and ready to go to work. And that doesn't mean, hey, you're walking up to the truck with a cup of coffee in your hands and a cigarette in your mouth, 5 minutes before work starts. I'm already going to start evaluating you. You're being evaluated right from the get-go there. So don't get overwhelmed, be on time, and start learning where all of the equipment, the tools, materials are located on the truck. You don't want to be overwhelmed by not knowing where everything goes on the truck. That was my biggest thing is I have the lineman tools and the hand tools on the passenger side. And as I make my way back, I get to stripping tools and some of the electrical connectors. And then I make my way all the way to the back and I have more tools. And as I rotate around to the left side of the truck, the driver's side, that's where the rigging was. So start understanding how that truck is set up so that you'll feel more comfortable, because as a pre-apprentice or a first-year apprentice, you're probably going to ride in the line truck. That's going to be your home base. Another thing is, hustle. Don't be a slacker. It doesn't mean that you sprint side to side, but hey, put a little bit of hustle in your step, get to where you're going to go. If the lineman or the foreman or the apprentice asks you to get something, hey, go get it. Make it a priority for that individual. Have a great attitude. Come to work, smile, and say, you know what, as hard as this work is, I'm getting paid really well, and this trade will carry me through the rest of my life. Learn as much as you can. It's going to take years to absorb all of the training and knowledge you'll need to become a journeyman.
Excellent advice, Max. And next we have one from Gabrielle Wag on what does it take to be a successful lineman? So as you progress in your career, what do you think it takes beyond that first year to really make it in the trade?
Great question. So know the rules and procedures and apply them in your daily work tasks. It's going to be overwhelming because you're going to get books that are thick, right? You'll have OSHA, you have your line work, you have construction standards, but you have to learn them. And you have to at least be familiar enough to not memorize every rule, but know where to get the answer and know how to apply them. Don't stop learning. Interact with other departments. Talk to the engineers, system operators, troubleshooters. Ask them about their jobs and how they do their work. The best thing that you could probably do is say, hey, how can I get better at my trade? Find out what the engineers are working on. Why they make a purchase to put a new piece of equipment into the field. And maybe you can provide them some input from the person who's actually in the field as to what would really make your job easier when they make those decisions. Being a lineman means that you're a teacher. And if you want to really learn the trade, teach it. Learn and teach it. The whole thing about being a lineman is you're coaching and mentoring others. You're bringing people up. And you don't want to withhold information because that young individual who's on your crew might one day be your pole partner, be watching out for your back, and you want them to have as much available information as possible so that you both go home at night. Last, always watch out for yourself and the crew and come home safe every night.
Perfect. And Jackson Cole wonders, what is your favorite part of being a lineman?
Wow. You know what? I was an athlete all my life, and I did lots. I played football in high school and college, and wrestled in high school and college, and ran track, but I tell you, it's the camaraderie. It's being on that crew, working every day with other guys that love their career. And you know what? The harder the work, the better it is. The satisfaction of a job, of working a storm where people have been out of power for 24, 36, 2, 3 days, and you come out there and, customers come out and go, hey, are you guys ever going to take a break? And, the crew, we look at them, we go, sir, or, ma'am, we're going to take a break and we can get your lights back on. And then probably, one of the most satisfying things you can do is climb that pole. It's the middle of the night. You install the jumpers and close the cutouts, and you see lights come on. That's one of my favorite parts about being a lineman, was restoring power and helping the people in my community.
Fabulous. And how long do you think it took for you to be confident in your line work?
That's a good one. About 6 years. And you go, well, how did you come up with that number, Max? Well, from the day I was hired, it took 4 years to complete my apprenticeship. And the day that I took my journeyman test, I took it in the morning. After lunch, I went from apprentice lineman in the morning to journeyman lineman in the afternoon. And the next thing I knew, I had an apprentice up the pole with me, and we were in rubber gloves doing 4 kV work off the pole. And I knew how to do the job, but now my job was to make sure that this apprentice and I finish the job and get off the pole safely. So that was after just making journeyman. But I think after you get a couple of years under your belt as a journeyman, you start to feel a little bit more comfortable. And then I would say after about 10 years in the trade, that's when I would say my experience and knowledge got to a point where I didn't feel like I would be surprised by anything. So 4 years to get to journeyman, 5 to 6 more years to where you're feeling comfortable, where, you can go out to a job, they can hand you a print, and you can go to work and do it safely.
Perfect. And how do you move up in your company? I know you wrote a book called Leadership for Linemen, which is wonderful. So can you give some tips on if they want to progress into more of a managerial supervisory role?
Sure. So learn as much about the trade as you can. Volunteer to be on different committees. So when you show management and you're getting ready to go into your interview for a foreman or supervisor or whatever position, you can state, hey, I was on the tool committee. I was on the safety committee. I was on the equipment committee. The things that I did allowed me to travel throughout the industry to see how other utilities bought equipment, structured their system. And, these are really good variables when you're sitting across from a candidate to say, this person is committed to our company. Make sure that you're getting your scheduled performance evaluations and that you always seek to improve on your past performance. No discipline issues. Stay out of trouble. Don't call in sick a lot. Plan your vacations and your personal leaves. Take other positions. If there are no positions open for foreman or supervisor, look to see if there are other opportunities in the company. Sometimes you have to move laterally before you can move vertically. So, and the great thing about that is, for example, take a troubleshooter position if it opens, or become the safety rep or an inspector or a line patrolman. As you start to bring all these different experiences to the table, management, at me as a supervisor, I'm like, I love it. I'm saying this is an individual who can step in and start to be, given responsibility because they've already taken the initiative. Finally, you may want to just, approach someone in a leadership position and ask them if they have time to discuss how they can move up in the company. You might schedule time with the general foreman or the superintendent and just say, hey, can I get 10, 15 minutes of your time? I'd like to talk to you about some things and how I can improve as a leader. And trust me, if that individual is interviewing you, for the next position and you've already taken the initiative to talk to them, it's going to stick.
Thank you, Max. And then White Hill wonders, what is the worst storm you have ever worked on?
Well, you know, a lot of people think that because we live in California that we always get great, beautiful weather and sunshine. But in Northern California, we have what's called this thing called it's a weather phenomenon called the Pineapple Express, where we get dumped just rivers of rain. We get torrential rain. So back in the 90s, we were just hammered with rainstorms. I remember 95, 96, we had tens of thousands of overtime hours. And I was on call and we were working, I took call and I was working 14 straight days, round the clock, 24/7. And I was just getting 8 hours rest between shifts. And I remember we went out to one job to relieve a crew and we couldn't get access to our vehicles or equipment. So everything was done by hand. I mean, with no bucket trucks, no nothing. We were climbing up poles. We were, you know, doing all the work. We had trees down across all of our lines. And I remember we went to relieve the crew so that they could go eat and then go rest. Excuse me. And they had put their line truck and set it up by a dry creek bed when they started. They put the stiff flakes down. When it rained so much, I turned around and looked and the line truck was floating down because of a flash flood in the riverbed. So that was probably the most intense experience with all the rain and the damage that we were working through.
Wow, that's crazy. And then Joseph Casavanoid wonders, is it better to be a union or non-union employee?
So that's a tricky question because, you know, I can see benefits to both sides, but let me answer with this. I'm not going to advocate either way. What I will say is that the union has a standardized system of training, staffing, and the resources available for representation and collective bargaining. But it's up to each individual to make that choice. And it depends on your location and the availability of work. You know, if you're limited to only working for, you know, a non-union entity and you really want to get in the trade, well, you know, that may be the choice for you unless you're willing to relocate and find another position with a utility or a union contractor. So it's up to the individual.
Perfect. And then Johnny Lawrence wants to know how much computer work is required in the line trade?
Well, a lot more than ever. Just about all documentation is migrating to online platforms, along with interacting with system operations to take clearances. Your job hazard analysis and job briefings a lot of companies are migrating right to an electronic platform. The apprenticeships and the after hours education is moving towards distance learning, especially under the conditions that we're in right now. Reporting on to work and using the OMS or the outage management system. The other areas is what we have is called EORs, you know, emergency operations restorations. So everything that is going on in the trade right now is much more, requires a much more savvy and technical proficiency as far as computer work.
Perfect. And then Ethan Ford and Austin Bird had a really good question about, do you think it's better to travel and work storms while you are young, or just try to settle somewhere and be stable when you're first starting out?
So again, that's an individual, you know, decision. Here's what I would say. If you have an opportunity to go to work for a utility or a contractor that can train you, provide you with good compensation and benefits and other opportunities, I would opt for that. And I'll tell you, there's always going to be storms and natural disasters in this trade. You don't have to chase them. So even if you work at a very stable utility where maybe you don't get as much of the quote unquote storms or those kinds of issues, we have what's called mutual assistance in this industry. And so a lot of times you'll be asked to go and assist and provide mutual aid to other utilities. And trust me, there's plenty of opportunity to work those storms. But hey, if that's your passion and you want to do it, then go do it. I would say, yeah, if you're going to do it when you're young, you know, because once you settle down and have a family, you're going to want stability.
Absolutely. And then how many years do average linemen work?
Tough question. I don't know the actual numbers because linemen can move into different positions
Mhm.
throughout their career. So if you're looking for numbers of years that a lineman would be acting as an active journeyman, that would be tough to nail down. So I guess you would have to look at certain types of data, like, are you looking at an individual who, are you asking about someone who's a journeyman lineman? So from the time you make journeyman to the time that you've moved into a different position. Now, I've heard some different numbers through the years, and the number that I've heard is 7 years as an active journeyman lineman. But that's a journeyman. So if you put in the 4 years before that, you're looking at least a decade plus of being in the trade and actively working in that position.
Sure. Okay, sounds good. And then we're going to move on to tips, techniques, and trends, Max. The first question is, what is your advice to build a single-phase transformer?
Okay, so you don't build the transformer. The transformer comes already manufactured. So I'm assuming that the questions are about the connections and the bus work.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start from the beginning. You have to identify, one, what is the primary voltage? And then what voltage are you seeking to provide to the customer? What does the job print call for? And what does the KVA require? So how much power does that transformer have to be able to supply? Once you've answered those questions, make sure you read the transformer nameplate so that you get the right one for the job. So that's where all the critical information is. And then don't forget to do a TTR or a turns ratio test to confirm that the transformer has the correct primary to secondary turns. And then finally, go to work.
Perfect. And then why is the Y system predominantly used over Delta in the United States, do you think? And this is from Dylan Johnson.
Okay, good question, Dylan. The Y system is better from an economical and safety engineering perspective. Single-phase Y transformers require only one cutout and one surge arrestor instead of two that are needed for a Delta-connected transformer. The multi-grounded Y system is an excellent ground and is directly connected back to the substation. On a Delta system, the ground of the transformer is dependent on a driven ground rod. Fuses and circuit breakers trip out faster due to overcurrent when there's a good ground return back to the source. And it's safer for the lineman because you're going to have multiple grounds throughout the system, plus you have a direct return path back to the substation where the system protection is located. And it's especially helpful when you're putting up your equipotential zone for your grounds to have that Y system for you.
Perfect. And then Avery Cooksey wonders if you like to work single phase or three phase. What's your preference?
So no preferences. I like all line work. But Avery, I would say the better question would be, do you prefer transmission or distribution? Do you prefer overhead to underground? Those are really the pertinent questions you want to ask as you go through your career, because those can be segmented into different specialties at different utilities.
Perfect. And now we'll move on to safety, which, as you mentioned before, is very important in line work because we want linemen to come home safely at the end of every day. So what are some steps that you take to ensure the safety of you and yourself in this line of work, just to protect your coworkers?
And do we know who that's from?
And we don't know who that, we don't know who asked that question, but
Okay.
How would you safeguard your crew members?
Okay, so always keep your head in the game. Don't get distracted. Don't get lax on the job. Know your safety rules and procedures and follow them. Ask questions, pay attention. If something looks wrong, say something. And be involved in the tailboard and communication.
Okay. And then is the risk worth the reward in line work? And that's from Ryan Brende.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Line work is highly rewarding and it pays well. But don't mistake risk with danger, okay? Line work is not dangerous if you learn the trade and practice safe habits and plan your workout. It becomes dangerous when you aren't prepared. You neglect to follow the rules and you don't have the training to eliminate or mitigate risks and hazards. So yeah, totally worth it.
Perfect. And have you ever had a close call that made you scared to go back to work? I thought this was an interesting question.
Yeah, so you know what? If you're in this trade long enough, you're going to have close calls. And the answer to that question is no. No, I've never been scared to go back to work. I've had to do some serious soul searching about my performance on some occasions when I've had a close call. You know, I remember one occasion where I was really close to making contact with the energized bus out of the back of a 12 kV substation. And I had made assumptions, and I was the foreman. And because of my training, I didn't. I had it ingrained in my training not to do certain behaviors. But after it had been pointed out to me by one of my linemen, I took a long walk in a field because I had a young family, a wife, a young child. And I said, man, how could I have done that? How could I have made that mistake? So yeah, you do soul searching, but I've never been scared to the point where I wouldn't go back.
Okay. And then climbing is a very big part of the line trade. As you mentioned, this job is very physically strenuous. So we had quite a few questions from the students about climbing. So the first one is from Lane Grenier, is what is the tallest pole you have ever climbed?
So I'm going to make an assumption you're talking about a wood pole, and the tallest one I ever climbed was 110 feet.
110 feet, my goodness.
Yep. Yeah, that's
scared of heights.
No, definitely not.
Okay. And then Boyd Cole wants to know more about fall protection and how it helps with safety. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So yeah, addressing your question about has it reduced falls? Well, just the fact that you've got more equipment that's designed to keep you fully attached to the pole, I would have to say probably. So the thing is utilities and contractors, they don't share their numbers, so I really don't know where the data would be on that subject. However, here's the caveat. Fall protection is not a substitute for proper climbing mechanics. The equipment is only as good as the individual using it. So you got to keep that in mind, that just because you have two belts, a secondary lanyard, a wood pole fall restriction device, you can still, because as a human being, you can make mistakes. You have to have excellent climbing mechanics to ensure that you're bringing the whole process together.
Perfect. Good point, Max. And you said at the beginning that you were into fitness before you got into the line trade, and that it's important to kind of stay in shape. What are some exercises that you can do to kind of stay in shape for climbing once you actually learn how to climb?
Yeah, so excellent question. I would say that you have to look at it differently. You have to take a holistic approach to staying in shape, to stay in this trade and have a great retirement 30, 35 years down the line, so you're physically capable. So I recommend a good weight training program. Keep your body strong, okay? It's all about your back, your shoulders, your knees, so stay strong. Weightlifting, I still, to this day, I still train. I lift weights 6 to 7 days a week. The other component to that is a healthy diet. You got to be careful about what you're putting into your body, and don't gain a lot of weight, because I can tell you when you're 30 years old and you're climbing all the time, all of a sudden at 35, hey, you took another position and now you haven't been climbing and you've gained 10, 15 pounds. Now that that size 32 belt is now a size 35, you're going to be carrying that weight with you, which will impact your knees and your back and your shoulders. So don't gain a lot of weight. The other thing is don't focus on cardio. Cardio isn't as important as strength, because line work is a marathon. You get to work, you're going to put in 8, 10, 12, 14-hour days. And so it's your physical shape is based on your muscular and your skeletal strength, as opposed to being able to run a marathon.
Excellent. And then Wyatt Maddox wonders, how many times do you climb in a week as a lineman? How often do you climb?
So, depends on the work.
Sure.
So most companies have bucket trucks and they emphasize they want the worker to use them as much as possible, which is, it's smart because companies have a lot of investment in alignment. And, you want that individual to be healthy, safe, and have a long career. It depends. If you're working in an area where there's a lot of backyard easements or locations with little to no access to machines, then you have to be prepared to climb. So again, so let me give you an example. In Sacramento, we have about 144,000 poles, and about 45 to 50% of them are in backyards. So, you can probably do the math and say, well, depending on the job, if I'm doing a lot of maintenance, the older poles were put into the backyard. The newer construction was probably underground. So that's where you get that difference. And so, depending on where you live and how your system is set up, will probably tell you how many climbs you're going to have.
Okay, great. And then Ryan Jester had a great question. Would you go into this career again?
In a heartbeat. It's, I've had a long career. I loved it. I had security. An old lineman once told me, Max, your security is in your hooks. And you couldn't speak to that more poignantly than, as a lineman, I knew that no matter what, no matter how bad things got in my life, that I could throw my tools on and get a job, a good one, and provide for my family. So would I do it again? Yep, in a heartbeat.
Thank you so much, Max. And I wanted to thank Susan Blazer and the students at Metropolitan Community College of Kansas City. Max, thank you so much for your wonderful advice for the students. And I also want to thank our Lineman Celebration Week sponsors for Education Wednesday, SensorLink, IFD Corp, and Lyman Barn. And Lyman, also don't forget to like and comment on this video on social media for the opportunity to win a Cabela's or Bass Pro gift card from IFD Corp. Again, this is presented by T&D World Magazine and Max Fuentes. And we encourage you to participate in Lineman Celebration Week and show your spirit for the line trade. This is Amy Fishbach, field editor for T&D World Magazine, and thanks again.